The final weapon, named CBH-1, Construction Battalion Hawaii 1, was a huge step forward in flamethrower design. Putting it in required 150 pounds of welding rod and 1,100 electrical connections, each one vital to the weapon's operation. The change took 1,200 man-hours per tank, with 150 parts specially made by CB metalworkers. Each change cost between $20,000 and $25,000, equal to about $360,000 today. The technical details were groundbreaking. The CBH-1 worked at 300 pounds per square inch of pressure, 3 times that of older models. Its top range went to 150 yards with thickened fuel, nearly 3 times the reach of portable flamethrowers. The fuel mix, a carefully measured blend of diesel fuel, gasoline, and napalm thickener made by the 43rd Chemical Laboratory, would burn at 1,500 Rs. The system could keep a steady fire for up to 80 seconds, though the plan suggested bursts of 2 to 3 seconds to save fuel and stay accurate. Most importantly, the flamethrower took the place of the tank's main gun, letting it turn a full 270 degrees and move up and down from 10 to plus 135 degrees through the tank's existing fire control systems. The gunner could aim the flame weapon as precisely as a normal cannon, using the same periscope and controls. This blending meant tank crews needed very little extra training to use the new weapon well. But maybe the most important new idea was mental. The CBs painted the changed tanks in standard Marine Corps olive green. No special marks, no sign of their awful goal. To Japanese watchers, they looked like normal Sherman tanks until the moment they opened fire. By then, it was too late. The fuel system itself was a wonder of design. The main fuel tanks held 290 gallons of thickened fuel, with an extra 10 gallons of unthickened fuel for starting the fire. A separate pressure tank held compressed nitrogen, picked over compressed air because nitrogen wouldn't feed a fire if the tank was hit. The whole system was built with many safety features to stop the terrible explosions that had troubled earlier flamethrower vehicles. Inside the command fort beneath Hill 382, General Kuribayashi had set up his defenses based on exact math-based plans. Kill zones crossed at certain angles. Cannon spotters hidden in small holes could guide fire onto any map spot in seconds. Machine gun posts were set up to create crossing areas of gunfire that would push American forces into pre-aimed cannon targets. The general's defense idea was beautifully simple. Save bullets, stay underground, and make the Americans come to you. His standing orders given to every leader were clear. Do not die until you have killed 10 Americans. No large-scale counterattacks would be allowed. Every soldier was told to hold his spot until overrun, then fight with grenades, bayonets, and finally with bare hands. Simple math suggested that with 21,000 defenders, they could cause 210,000 losses, far more than the entire American attack force. Japanese defense thinking had changed a great deal since the early Pacific fights. Spy reports from Saipan and Peleliu stressed the weakness of flamethrower soldiers. The weapon's sign, the black smoke from burning diesel fuel, made soldiers easy to see. The weapon's short range meant soldiers had to show themselves to enemy fire. In earlier fights, portable flamethrower losses had been over 70%, with some groups losing 92% of their flame soldiers. Special training focused on anti-flamethrower methods. Machine gunners were told to aim their fire at any soldier carrying the clear twin tanks of a portable flamethrower. Snipers got extra bullets just for aiming at flame soldiers. Infantry groups practiced rushing flamethrower spots with bayonets, using the weapon's minimum range where the soldier couldn't point the nozzle down enough to defend himself. But all Japanese planning guessed that flamethrowers would be carried by foot soldiers. The idea of armored flamethrowers, tanks that could come near strong posts under the safety of their own armor while giving accurate fire attacks at an unheard-of distance, had never been thought of. Japanese defense posts, carefully built to handle cannons and sky bombing, had no special plans against burning fuel that could leak through openings and air vents. This mistake would prove disastrous. The strongholds that were Japan's greatest strength would become death traps when they met weapons that turned solid defenses into burning places. The 8 M4A3 flamethrower tanks landed on Iwo Jima's beaches on February 19th, D-Day, mixed in with the regular Sherman tanks of the 4th and 5th Tank Battalions. The official Marine Corps name was M4A3R5, though different papers used different names, including POACWSH1 and CBMK1. They came ashore in the fifth wave around 10 a.m. after the beaches had been made somewhat safe. Navy orders said they should stay in reserve during the first attack. Marine leaders wanted to check the battle situation before using these valuable and assets that couldn't be replaced. The tanks were spread out carefully, 4 given to the 4th Marine Division, 4 to the 5th Marine Division. Each tank had a number for identification, 431 through 438. Some crews had painted names on their tanks: Hellfire, Corkscrew, Blaze of Glory, but most stayed unmarked, their awful goal hidden until the moment of the fight. For the first 24 hours, the flamethrower tanks sat unused near the beach, while Marines died by the hundreds, trying to move forward against unseen Japanese posts. The volcanic dust, which came up to a man's calf with each step, made moving on foot tiring. Usual methods were failing terribly. Navy ship guns couldn't get through forts buried under 10 feet of volcanic rock and cement. Cannon shells blew up harmlessly against posts built to take direct hits from 16-inch naval guns. Marine riflemen found themselves attacking strongholds that might as well have been solid mountains. The first day's losses were shocking. 2,120 Marines killed or hurt. The beach itself became a killing field as Japanese cannons hidden before opened fire on the packed landing forces. Sherman tanks trying to move inland got stuck in the dust or were wrecked by hidden anti-tank guns. By night, the attack force had moved less than 700 yards from the beach, far short of D-Day goals that aimed for taking the first airfield. On the morning of February 20th, D+1, the situation was hopeless. The 21st Marine Regiment was stuck trying to cross Motoyama Airfield No. 1. 3 cement small forts controlled the path, their crossing machine gun fire making a kill zone 200 yards wide. 2 rifle companies had already been wiped out trying to attack from the front. The regiment had lost 35% of its men in less than 48 hours. Lieutenant Colonel William R. Duplantis, leading the 3rd Battalion 21st Marines, made the choice that would change the battle's direction. He called for the flamethrower tanks. At 2:20 p.m., the 1st M4A3R3 flamethrower tank joined the fight. Tank number 431, led by Staff Sergeant Robert E. L. Meza, a veteran of Saipan and Tinian, came near the Japanese posts from a slanted angle, using wrecked Japanese planes as cover. To Japanese watchers, it looked like another standard Sherman trying the same failed attack. The tank's approach was careful. Meza knew that surprise would be their only benefit. Inside the tank, the 5-man crew got ready for action. The driver, Private First Class James T. Morrison, steered the tank through the volcanic dust that could bog down the 35-ton vehicle. The assistant driver, Private Robert E. Chen, manned the front machine gun watching for Japanese foot soldiers. The loader, Corporal Anthony J. Vitelli, checked the fuel pressure gauges, 300 psi, perfect for top range. The gunner, Corporal Thomas J. Carlson, looked through his periscope, aiming at the closest small fort. At 125 yards from the nearest small fort, Meza gave the order. "Gunner, flamethrower. Pillbox fire!" The CBH-1 flamethrower shot out with a sound people said was like the devil's own blowtorch. A stream of napalm-thickened fuel oil flew through the air, pushed by compressed nitrogen. The burning liquid hit the small fort's opening with terrible precision, splashing through the machine gun slot and flowing inside like lava. The effect was immediate and awful. Temperatures inside the cement building shot past 1,200°F in seconds. The oxygen was used up so quickly that Japanese soldiers choked before the flames got to them. Those who survived the first blast tried to run through back exits, only to be shot down by Marine riflemen who had learned to place themselves for exactly this possibility. Sergeant Meza turned the turret 30 degrees and attacked the second small fort. This time, the defenders were ready. A Japanese 47mm anti-tank gun fired at close range, the shell hitting the Sherman's front armor and bouncing into the sky. The tank shook but kept moving forward. Carlson shot another burst, keeping the fire going for 15 seconds, until black smoke poured from every opening of the fort. The third small fort needed different methods. Its spot behind a rocky hill stopped a direct attack. Misa told Morrison to move forward to within 80 yards, dangerously close to Japanese foot soldier posts. As the tank came over a small hill, Japanese soldiers came out of small holes, rushing forward with explosive packs and magnetic mines. The tank's front gunner opened fire with his .30 caliber machine gun, but several Japanese soldiers got to the tank's blind spot. This was the moment the CB's changes proved their value. Unlike standard flamethrower tanks that could only shoot forward, the CBH-1's full-turning ability let Carlson swing the turret 180 degrees and fire right behind the tank. The attacking foot soldiers were swallowed by a flaming wall that witnesses said looked like the gates of hell opening. With the third small fort stopped, Marines of the 21st Regiment moved forward 400 yards in 2 hours, more ground than they had gained in the last 2 days. News spread quickly through the Marine message network. The flamethrower tanks worked. More importantly, they survived where normal tanks failed. Within 6 hours, all 8 flamethrower tanks were in action across the front. The tactical change was immediate and deep. Tank number 434, helping the 23rd Marines near the East Boat Basin, wrecked 4 strong posts in a single afternoon. The crew created a method called corkscrew and burn, coming in a spiral path to dodge anti-tank fire while keeping a steady flame to hold them down. The mental impact was as terrible as the physical damage. Japanese soldiers who had been trained to die at their posts started running from their spots when they saw the flame tanks coming, leaving strongholds rather than face being burned. Tank number 437 created breach and clear methods with the 24th Marines. The flamethrower would first stop a post's defenders. Then, Marine builders would rush forward with explosive charges to permanently wreck the stronghold. This mix proved incredibly effective against posts that had held out for days against normal attacks. In one afternoon, a single flame tank engineer team wrecked 7 forts that had stopped a whole battalion's advance. But it was tank number 432 that showed the weapon's true mental impact. Helping the 26th Marines near the bottom of Mount Suribachi, the tank came near a group of linked caves. The commander, Sergeant William A. Patterson, told his driver to stop 100 yards from the cave mouths. Through the tank's periscope, Patterson could see Japanese soldiers watching from the darkness. Patterson shot a short burst of flame into the air. A show. The mental effect was immediate and never seen before. Japanese soldiers started running from back exits, leaving posts they had been ordered to defend to the death. Marine riflemen were so shocked they at first didn't shoot at the running enemy. In 30 minutes, a whole defense area fell apart without the tank firing a shot directly at enemy posts. This was the first mass leaving of defense posts in Japanese Army history. By nightfall on February 20th, Marine units were already changing their methods based on flamethrower tank availability. Attack plans were put off until flame tanks could be brought up. Infantry units learned to follow 50 yards behind the tanks, close enough to use the shock effect, but far enough to dodge the heat blast that could burn eyebrows at 30 yards. Cannon spotters started marking targets just for flamethrower attack rather than normal bombing. The numbers from the first day of flame tank battle were amazing. 47 strong posts wrecked. Marine losses in supported areas down 40% from the day before. 600 yards of land gained in areas that had been stuck for 48 hours. But the most important number was mental. For the first time, large numbers of Japanese soldiers were leaving their posts rather than dying there. The Japanese reaction was quick, but mostly useless. General Kurabayashi gave emergency orders that night, naming the flame tanks as top targets. All available 47mm anti-tank guns were to focus fire on these tanks. Special attack teams were formed, volunteers who would attack with explosive charges tied to their bodies. Infantry units were told to aim at the flame tank's view slots with heavy rifle fire, hoping to blind the crews. But the main problem was unbeatable. The flamethrower tanks looked just like regular Shermans until they fired. Japanese gunners couldn't pick out top targets until it was too late. Worse, focusing on flame tanks meant ignoring normal tanks that gave covering fire. The Americans had gained a tactical surprise through mechanical new ideas. On February 23rd, D+4, the same day Marines raised the flag on Mount Suribachi, the flamethrower tanks met their biggest challenge. The 3rd Marine Division was trying to take Hill 382, the second highest point on Iwo Jima and the main part of Kurabayashi's northern defenses. The hill was filled with forts and tunnels reaching 7 stories underground. Japanese defenders had pre-aimed every path with cannons and mortars. The post had been built by Japanese builders to be unbeatable. Multiple defense lines, crossing areas of gunfire, underground hallways letting defenders reappear behind attackers. Earlier attacks had failed with losses over 50%. The 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, had lost 70% of its men trying to take just the paths to the hill. At 8:00 a.m., 4 flamethrower tanks moved forward in a staggered line, helped by 6 normal Shermans and a battalion of Marine infantry. This time, the Japanese were ready. Hidden 75mm mountain guns, larger than the standard 47mm anti-tank weapons, had been placed just to attack flame tanks. As the lead flame tank came over the first hill, heavy fire shot out from 3 hidden spots. The first shell hit Tank 433's track, stopping it. The crew kept firing the flamethrower while stopped, making a curtain of flame that hid the tanks behind and held down Japanese posts. This act of giving up oneself let the other tanks move. Tank number 431 pushed through the smoke, moving through cannon fire that would have stopped a foot soldier attack cold. Shell pieces hit against the armor like hail. The driver, Private First Class Morrison, later said he drove by periscope through smoke so thick he could barely see 10 feet ahead. At 60 yards from the main Japanese fort complex, Tank 434's flamethrower shot out. But this time, the Japanese had changed. Builders had put steel plates over fort openings that could be closed between machine gun bursts. The flames splashed harmlessly against the sealed steel. It seemed the Japanese had found a way to beat the flame tanks. The gunner, Corporal Michael Rodriguez, made a key insight. The steel plates glowed cherry red after being hit by flame for a while. Metal that hot would bend, making gaps. Rodriguez kept firing for 45 seconds, much longer than the plan suggested, dangerously using up fuel. The steel plate bent. The fire mixture poured through the gaps. The fort's inside became a huge fire. Bullets cooked off in explosive chains. Cement cracked from the heat shock. Secondary explosions showed the tunnel entrances Japanese builders had carefully hidden. Marine infantry rushed forward with explosive packs, throwing explosives into every opening before the defenders could regroup. In 3 hours, Hill 382's outer defenses had been broken. The unbeatable post was falling, but the battle also showed the flamethrower tank's limits. Tank number 431 ran out of fuel after 80 seconds of continuous use. Refueling meant pulling back to special areas where fuel trucks waited, a process that took at least 2 hours. During that time, Japanese defenders could reinforce and regroup. The tanks were powerful, but not endless. Most importantly, on this same day, Corporal Herschel Woody Williams showed that flamethrowers carried by one person still had a vital role. When flamethrower tanks couldn't move through a narrow canyon called the amphitheater, Williams went forward on foot with a 70-pound M22 flamethrower. In 4 hours of fighting, covered only by 4 riflemen, 2 of whom would die protecting him, Williams wrecked 7 small forts that were out of reach for tanks. Williams's method worked well with the flame tanks. Where tanks couldn't go, brave men with portable flamethrowers could still move forward. His actions that day would earn him the Medal of Honor. He would become the last living World War II Medal of Honor winner, passing away in June 2022 at age 98. His award notice read in part, "Quick to volunteer his services when our tanks were moving uselessly to open a path for the infantry through the network of reinforced concrete pillboxes, buried mines, and black volcanic sands, Corporal Williams daringly went forward alone to attempt the reduction of devastating machine gun fire from the unyielding positions. The numbers from the first week of battle told an amazing story. In areas where flamethrower tanks worked, Marine losses dropped by 40% compared to unsupported attacks. Japanese posts that had held out for days against normal attacks fell in hours. The 8 tanks had used 70,000 gallons of fuel mix in 7 days, wrecking an estimated 300-strong posts. Daily use averaged 10,000 gallons, a supply problem that required setting up special fuel stops near the front lines. By early March, the battle had moved to Iwo Jima's northern high ground, a terrible place of sulfur pits, twisted canyons, and volcanic rock formations that made tank operations almost impossible. General Kuribayashi had placed his final defense line here just because the land helped defenders. The area had been called the meat grinder by Marines who faced 850 losses taking a single hill. Tanks that tried to move over the broken ground tore tracks on sharp volcanic rocks or got stuck on unseen obstacles under the dust. The flamethrower tanks changed again. Unable to move freely, they became mobile small forts placed at key spots to help infantry advances. Marine builders from the 5th Engineer Battalion worked through the night-building ramps and clearing paths, often under sniper fire, letting flame tanks reach spots once thought unreachable. When a direct attack was impossible, the tanks fired indirectly, bouncing flame streams off rocks to reach around corners and into hidden spots. On March 8, D+17, tank number 436 made what crews called the impossible shot. Helping the 9th Marines attack Cushman's Pocket, a group of caves and forts built into a nearly straight cliff face. The tank leader, Sergeant Daniel L. Foster, figured that flame fired at top height might go over the cliff edge and fall into Japanese posts from above. The physics were tight. The CBH-1 flamethrower could lift to 35 degrees, but hitting the target needed a 40-degree angle. Foster told his driver to place the tank on a pile of rocks made by naval bombing, tilting the whole tank backward. With the tank shakily balanced and enemy mortar shells falling around them, the gunner, Corporal Anthony Vitelli, fired the flamethrower. The melted napalm flew high into the air, seemed to hang for a moment at its peak, then poured down into the Japanese posts. The effect was terrible, not just physically but mentally. Japanese soldiers had thought their high posts were safe from flamethrower attack. That idea died in the huge fire. Witnesses said Japanese soldiers jumped from the cliffs rather than burn alive, choosing death by falling over death by fire. By mid-March, the flamethrower tanks had become the main focus of a team of different weapons. Each flame tank worked with a special support team. Normal tanks for stopping enemy anti-tank guns, infantry for close protection against suicide attackers, builders for clearing obstacles, and ammunition carriers bringing up the 300-gallon fuel trailers that extended work time. This working together was a revolution in attack methods that would shape Marine Corps thinking for decades. The fuel supply alone needed amazing work. Electrician's mate second-class Kislan, one of the original designers, had gone with the tanks to Iwo Jima to oversee repairs. He later said that keeping the 8 tanks working needed a supply line reaching back to Pearl Harbor. Fuel mixing stations worked 24 hours a day, mixing diesel fuel, gasoline, and napalm powder in exact amounts. The mix had to be used within 72 hours, or it would separate and block the flame guns. The Japanese reaction kept changing as well. Special tank killer teams were formed, volunteers who would attack with explosive charges tied to their bodies. These human bombs had some success. Tank number 438 was wrecked on March 11th when a Japanese soldier blew himself up against the tank's engine area, killing 3 of the 5 crew members. But such methods were ultimately useless. For every flame tank hurt, replacements came from the beach, and hurt flame tanks were often fixed and sent back to fight. General Kuribayashi, watching from his command fort deep under the northern high ground, understood the long-term meanings. In his final report to Imperial Headquarters, sent on March 17th, he wrote, "The enemy's special flame tanks have proven more effective than all their cannons and sky bombing combined. They do in minutes what normal weapons cannot do in days. We have no effective way to stop this weapon. The Americans have not just better numbers, but better imagination." The high point came during the final week of March, as Marines pushed into the Gorge, Kuribayashi's last fort. This twisted maze of canyons and caves, called the Bloody Gorge by Marines, was the final test of American tactical new ideas versus Japanese defensive will. Here, in a space less than 700 yards square, the last 3,000 Japanese defenders readied for their last stand. On March 21st, D+30, all working flamethrower tanks, 6 of the original 8, with 2 being fixed, gathered for a planned attack. They had been supported by 4 more flame tanks rushed from Hawaii. Though these newer models used the less effective Ronson system with only 60 to 80-yard range, the attack would be the largest gathering of flame weapons in the Pacific War. Tank number 431, fixed after being stopped on Hill 382, led the advance. Its armor showed the marks of battle. Welded patches where shell pieces had gone through, dents from dozens of hits that had not gone through, scorch marks from near misses. Number 433, with a makeshift track fix that gave it a clear clanking sound, took the left side. Numbers 434, 436, and 437 made the center, while 432 held the right. The attack started at 10 a.m. with the tanks moving in a crescent shape, making overlapping fields of flame that left no empty space for Japanese defenders to use. Marine infantry followed behind them, throwing white phosphorus grenades into cave mouths to mark targets for the flame tanks. Builders with explosive charges sealed posts after the flamethrowers had cleared them. The Japanese opposition was extreme, but increasingly useless. Suicide squads charged from hidden small holes only to be burned before reaching their targets. Anti-tank guns fired at close range, their crews keeping up fire even as flames covered their posts. In one unusual event, a Japanese officer came out of a fort carrying a samurai sword, charging right at tank number 434. The tank's front gunner held his fire, maybe from shock or respect, letting Marine riflemen shoot down the officer just yards from the tank. His sword was later found and sent to Marine Corps headquarters as a symbol of the enemy's hopeless bravery. By sunset on March 21st, the gorge had been entered. Over 800 Japanese defenders lay dead, many burned beyond recognition. The flamethrower tanks had used 8,000 gallons of fuel mix in a single day, a record for the fight. Marine losses, while still high at 92 killed and 257 hurt, were a fraction of what a normal attack would have cost, but the cost of victory was becoming clear on both sides. Tank crews reported serious mental pain from their part in the killing. Corporal Carlson of Tank 431 later said, "You could hear them screaming when the flame hit. Not for long, but you heard it. Sometimes at night I still hear it. We did what we had to do, but I'll never forget the smell." Burning flesh mixed with sulfur from the volcanic rock. Repair crews found human remains melted to tank tracks, needing blowtorches to take them off. The tanks themselves were wearing out under the constant pressure of battle. Transmissions failed from the strain of working in volcanic dust. Fuel lines got blocked with carbon bits from the napalm mix. Track pins broke from the weight of extra armor plates welded on for protection. By late March, keeping even 4 tanks working required taking parts from hurt vehicles. On March 26, 1945, Iwo Jima was declared safe. The battle had lasted 36 days instead of the planned 5. American losses totaled 26,038, including 6,121 killed, numbers that shocked the American public and Army leaders. Japanese losses were almost total. Of about 21,000 defenders, only 216 survived as prisoners. The rest died fighting or, in growing numbers as the battle went on, by suicide rather than face capture or death by flame. The flamethrower tanks had changed the way the battle worked. After-action reports credited them with lowering American losses by an estimated 5,000 men. They had wrecked over 1,000 strong posts, used 360,000 gallons of fuel mix, and deeply changed Marine Corps attack thinking. But perhaps most importantly, they had broken the idea of Japanese being unbeatable in defensive posts. Captain Frank C. Caldwell, leading Company F, 26th Marines, gave perhaps the shortest summary. It was the flame tank, more than any other supporting weapon, that won this battle. Cannons, naval gunfire, and sky bombing could not dig the Japanese out from their underground forts. The flamethrower tanks did what nothing else could. Statistical studies showed the true impact. Over 30% of Japanese losses on Iwo Jima were caused by flame weapons, both tank-mounted and portable. In areas where flame tanks worked, the rate of advance went up by 300% compared to unsupported attacks. Japanese prisoners, a rare thing in Pacific battles, numbered 216, more than the combined total from Tarawa, Saipan, and Peleliu. Many specifically mentioned fear of burning, alive as their reason for giving up. The tactical effects went far beyond Iwo Jima. The Marine Corps immediately asked for 54 more flamethrower tanks for future actions. Colonel Unmacht's team at Schofield Barracks went into high-speed production. Working with a top priority, the same level given to the B-29 bomber and the Manhattan Project, they created the better CBH-2 model with longer range and more reliability. By June 1945, 70 new flame tanks were ready for Operation Downfall, the planned attack on Japan. The Army, seeing Marine success at Iwo Jima, sped up its own flamethrower tank program. The whole 713th Tank Battalion was changed to flame tanks for the Okinawa fight. During the Battle of Okinawa in April to June 1945, Army flame tanks would use 200,000 gallons of fuel mix, proving just as effective against Japanese cave systems in the southern part of the island. The weapon that had been a last-minute quick fix became standard equipment for Pacific actions. But the long-term effects reached beyond battlefield methods. Japanese Army thinking, developed over centuries, had failed disastrously against American technological new ideas. The flamethrower tank stood for something more than a new weapon. They showed the change of warfare from single-person courage to factory power. The production numbers tell their own story. Colonel Unmacht's flame tank group in the end made 354 flame tanks by the war's end. The Seabees at Schofield Barracks made 226,243 gallons of flamethrower fuel. The napalm mixing plant they built could make 1,000 gallons per day. This factory power, copied across the Pacific, meant American forces could literally burn their way through Japanese defenses. The Seabees who had made these weapons got little public praise. Machinists Mate Riker and electricians Mate Kislin went back to civilian life after the war, their names forgotten except in hard-to-find technical reports. Colonel Unmacht kept creating chemical weapons until he retired, his part in the victory known only to a few military history experts. Yet their new idea had saved thousands of American lives and shortened one of the Pacific War's bloodiest battles. The tank crews faced different problems. Many dealt with what would later be known as post-traumatic stress disorder. The memory of human beings turned to ash, of screams cut short by consuming flame, troubled men who had done what duty required. Sergeant Meza never talked about his service until shortly before he died in 1993, telling his grandson, "We did what we had to do." Nobody should be proud of burning men alive, but those tanks saved a lot of Marine lives. That's what I try to remember. Veterans of the flame tanks formed their own quiet support group after the war. They met every year in Hawaii, going back to Schofield Barracks where their weapons had been made. These meetings, not covered by the news, let men share stories too terrible for civilian understanding. The last meeting was held in 2010 with only 4 living crew members there. The Japanese view came out slowly through prisoner questionings and found papers. Soldiers who had been taught that death in battle guaranteed a better afterlife found themselves frozen by the fear of being burned. The shame of running from battle spots seemed better than dying in underground ovens. This mental breakdown led to the first large-scale surrenders in Japanese Army history. Lieutenant Yamada, who had seen the first flamethrower tank attack on February 20th, survived the battle as one of the 216 prisoners. In post-war talks with American intelligence officers, he said, "We had prepared for every type of death, bullets, shells, bayonets, starvation. We had not prepared for burning fuel that looked for us in our deepest forts. The flame tanks broke our spirit in ways no normal weapon could. They turned our greatest strength, our underground strongholds, into our graves." Former Sergeant Masao Hayashi, captured after being burned while running from a fort, gave graphic testimony. "The napalm came like a flood pouring into every space. Men tried to escape through emergency exits but found more flames waiting. Some shot themselves rather than burn. Others ran into American gunfire, choosing bullets over being burned. I saw warriors who had fought since China refused to enter positions after seeing flame tanks coming. This was not the death we had trained for." The change shown by the flamethrower tanks carried on into the post-war time. The United States Marine Corps, studying the success at Iwo Jima, completely rebuilt its attack, thinking around combined arms methods, mixing armor, infantry, and builders. The idea of special armor for certain battlefield problems became standard Army thinking. Future weapons work would focus on being adaptable and new ideas over pure firepower. The technology itself kept getting better. The M4A3R3 Sherman flamethrower tanks served in Korea, where they proved just as good against Chinese fort systems during the battles for the Punch Bowl and Heartbreak Ridge. Marine flame tanks wrecked over 300 Chinese posts during the Korean War, though with less big effect because of better Chinese knowledge of the weapon's abilities. The last American flame tank, the M132 armored flamethrower based on the M113 armored personnel carrier, wasn't retired until 1978, ending a weapon line that started with 8 quickly changed Shermans in a secret warehouse in Hawaii. By then, thermobaric weapons and precision-guided bombs had replaced flamethrowers as the main way of beating strong posts. International law eventually limited flamethrower use, with Protocol 3 of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons limiting fire weapons. The weapon that had been key at Iwo Jima became debated as public views shifted against weapons seen as too cruel. Yet military history experts note the irony. The flamethrower tanks, for all their horror, had shortened the battle and possibly saved thousands of lives that a normal attack would have cost. The factory achievement cannot be ignored. The United States made 49 POW-34 Sherman tanks during World War II. Only 354 were changed to flamethrower setup. Yet, these few hundred vehicles had an impact far greater than their numbers. At Iwo Jima, 8 tanks had changed the direction of a battle that might have lasted months and cost tens of thousands more losses. The production cost, about $200,000 per changed tank in 1945, seems small compared to the lives saved. Military experts figured that each flame tank at Iwo Jima possibly saved 625 American losses based on loss rates in unsupported versus flame-supported attacks. In the cold math of war, the investment in technology had paid off in blood not shed. But perhaps the deepest impact was mental. The flamethrower tanks had shown that technological new ideas could beat even the most extreme human opposition. The age of single warrior skill was ending, replaced by a time where victory belonged to nations able to have better factory production and technical new ideas. The samurai spirit, for all its nobility, could not stand up to liquid fire sent by mass-produced machines. In the volcanic ground of Iwo Jima, under memorials to courage and sacrifice, lie the remains of over 20,000 Japanese soldiers who died defending posts they thought were unbeatable. Many were burned by weapons they never dreamed could exist. Their deaths marked not just the end of a battle, but the end of a time when spiritual commitment could overcome material weakness. The 8 M4A3R3 flamethrower tanks that fought at Iwo Jima were, in the end, machines. Steel, aluminum, rubber, and mechanical parts put together by workers who would never see battle. Yet they stood for something bigger. The gathering of American factory strength, scientific new ideas, and mechanical genius in the service of victory. The Seabees who built them, the Marines who crewed them, and the Japanese who died facing them were all part of a change that would define modern warfare. Today, the last living flamethrower tank from Iwo Jima sits in the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Quantico, Virginia. Tank number 434, the museum piece, shows the marks of its service. Welding marks where armor was patched, dents from shell hits, scratches from volcanic rock. A small sign notes its details and battle history. What it cannot show is the sound of compressed nitrogen releasing, the smell of burning napalm mixed with sulfur, the sight of liquid fire flowing like water into underground forts. Visitors often pass quickly, bothered by the weapon's awful goal. School children on field trips ask why anyone would make such a horrible weapon. Veterans who understand its history stop longer, some saluting, others just looking in quiet memory. For them, the tank stands not for the celebration of war, but for understanding war's terrible needs. The last meeting of Iwo Jima flame tank veterans was held in 2015 on the battle's 70th anniversary. Only 3 crew members came, all in their 90s. They gathered at the museum, sharing memories with history experts eager to save first-hand stories. Corporal Anthony Vitelli, former gunner on Tank 436, offered perhaps the most moving thought. People ask if I'm proud of what we did. Pride isn't the right word. We did a terrible job that had to be done. Those tanks saved Marine lives. That's enough. The men who designed, built, and used these machines have almost all passed into history. Corporal Herschel Woody Williams, who fought alongside the flame tanks with his portable flamethrower, was the last Medal of Honor winner from Iwo Jima to die, passing in June 2022 at age 98. With him went the last living memory of flame warfare's terrible reality. His foundation continues to honor Gold Star families, making sure the sacrifice of those who died is not forgotten. Colonel Unmacht's secret reports, made public in the 1970s, show the frantic speed of new ideas that made the flame tanks. Working 20-hour days, sleeping in turns next to their welding tools, the CBs had done what normal military buying would have taken years to do. Their reward was seeing their creation succeed beyond all hopes, shortening one of the Pacific War's bloodiest battles. The Japanese military records, open to researchers in the 1980s, give the enemy's view on facing flame tanks. Report after report tells of the paralysis of watching liquid fire come near, knowing that cement and steel offered no safety. Orders to hold posts to the death became pointless when death came as flowing fire that found every hiding place. One Japanese report noted, "The flame tanks canceled every benefit of our defensive posts. Height meant nothing when fire could go over obstacles. Depth meant nothing when flame flowed like water into our tunnels. Concrete and steel that could handle tons of explosives were useless against liquid fire." General Kuribayashi's final message, sent just before his death in late March 1945, had a knowing thought. The Americans have not just beaten us with better numbers or firepower. They have beaten us with better imagination, turning our greatest strength, our underground strongholds, into death traps. Future wars will belong to nations that can imagine new forms of warfare, not those who perfect old ones. His guess proved right. The revolution in Army affairs that started with 8 flame tanks at Iwo Jima went on through guided missiles, precision weapons, and cyber warfare. The rule stayed the same. Technological new ideas beat old methods. Imagination wins over tradition. The change from normal to flame warfare at Iwo Jima took just days, but changed battle thinking forever. Marines who had been trained for old-style attack tactics learned to work with flame tanks, using their shock effect to break defense lines thought to be unbeatable. This working together happened not through formal training, but through battlefield new ideas, changing under fire, that showed American military flexibility. Statistical study done after the war showed amazing patterns in areas where flame tanks worked. Japanese defenders were 70% more likely to leave their posts before being overrun. The mental impact was greater than the physical damage. Just the presence of flame tanks in an area often caused a defensive collapse without a shot being fired. One Marine intelligence report noted, "The enemy's fear of flame tanks is close to panic." Prisoners report that soldiers refuse orders to take posts once flame tanks are seen in the area. The 8 flamethrower tanks of Iwo Jima had done something amazing. In 36 days of fighting, they had proven a new form of warfare, saved thousands of American lives, and helped win one of World War II's most important battles. Their legacy lived on in every later conflict where American forces faced dug-in enemies, from Korea to Vietnam to Iraq. Yet the moral questions are still not answered. The tank crews who survived often struggled with what they had done. The efficiency of killing by fire, the factory scale of burning, challenged old ideas of honorable warfare. These men had been tools of a terrible need, using weapons that turned human beings to ash in seconds. Many never spoke of their service, taking their memories to the grave rather than trouble others with the horror. The final word comes from a 1985 healing ceremony on Iwo Jima. Former tank commander Robert Meza and former Lieutenant Koshiro Yamada, who had seen the first flame tank attack, stood together where Tank 431 had first fired 40 years earlier. Yamada spoke through a translator. "I hated you for 40 years. The flame tanks killed my friends in ways I cannot forget. But I understand now. War makes monsters of us all. You did what you had to do, as did we." Meza answered simply, "We were all just boys trying to survive. I'm glad we both lived to stand here today." The 2 old warriors hugged. As the sun set over Iwo Jima's black sand beaches, the veterans walked together toward the memorial to all who died. Behind them, Mount Suribachi rose against the darkening sky. The island that had once burned with battle anger had returned to peace. The age of the flamethrower tank had started and ended in the Pacific, its legacy written in fire across volcanic islands. 8 changed Shermans had changed the way of warfare, showing that victory in modern conflict belonged to nations able to join factory strength to battlefield new ideas. The flames had long since died, but their impact on military history burned forever. In the end, the Battle of Iwo Jima was won not by courage alone, though courage there was plenty of on both sides, but by the joining of American factory power and battlefield new ideas. The flamethrower tanks stood for the coming together of technology, methods, and will that would define American military power for generations to come. They were weapons of their time, necessary evils in a war that needed total victory. The Japanese defenders had fought with unmatched bravery, following orders to fight to the death. They had built the toughest defense post in the Pacific War, an underground fortress that normal weapons could not break. But they had not expected fire weapons that poured like melted rain, looking for every cave and fort, turning their underground safe place into a crematorium. Their loss was not a failure of courage, but a clash with better technology and new ideas. The numbers tell the final story with harsh clearness. 8 flamethrower tanks, 360,000 gallons of fuel mix, over 1,000 strong posts wrecked, an estimated 5,000 American losses prevented, over 6,000 Japanese soldiers killed by flame weapons, 36 days of fighting that might have stretched to months without flame weapons. The math of modern warfare, where technological benefit translates directly to lives saved and battles won. The volcanic island of Iwo Jima, now given back to Japan and renamed Iwo To, shows few clear marks of the battle that once raged across its surface. Nature has taken back the battlefield, covering shell holes with plants, filling ditches with volcanic soil. But under the surface, sealed caves and collapsed tunnels still hold the remains of soldiers who died in the flames, their sacrifice remembered by ever fewer living witnesses. The last word belongs to General Holland M. Smith, commander of the V Amphibious Corps at Iwo Jima, who wrote in his book, "The flamethrower tanks were the difference between victory and catastrophe. Without them, we would have paid an unbearable price for every yard of that cursed island. They were horrible weapons, but war is horrible business. In the end, they saved more lives than any other weapon we used. The flames that consumed Japanese posts on Iwo Jima have long since died. The men who used them have mostly passed into history. But the revolution they created, the change of warfare from single-person combat to technological power, continues to shape military thinking worldwide. In 8 changed Sherman tanks, America had found the weapon that would break the stalemate of the Pacific War's toughest fortress, forever changing the nature of warfare in the process. The battle was over. The war would soon follow. But the echo of those flames, the sound of compressed nitrogen releasing, the sight of liquid fire flowing into underground forts, the screams cut short by consuming heat, would ring through military history forever. The age of the warrior had ended in flames on a volcanic island in the Pacific. The age of technological warfare had begun.